You smell that? The smell of a sauce that's been cooking all day? Maybe it's from your grandma, maybe it's from your real nonna. I watched a bunch of stuff on YouTube and decided what I liked and decided to make my own recipe. So this ain't mom's spaghetti, it's definitely not Nona's. This is Mike's spaghetti sauce. Let's get to it. The first thing you're gonna wanna do is chop yourself up some real good veggies. Now I'm not making a meat sauce, I'm making a nice veggie sauce. So I've got some carrots, some onion, some celery, some basil, some oregano for some nice herbaceousness. I got a whole bunch of fresh chopped Roma tomatoes, some fresh chopped garlic, and a mountain of cheese. No recipe in Wisconsin would be complete without a mountain of cheese. Well, let's start adding our ingredients one at a time and see how this whole thing comes together. Now, because I'm not using meat, I've got a butt ton of olive oil in there. That's going to be our fat for this. You need a little bit of fat because you want to get some good char on those veggies. You want them to release all their aromas and flavors into your sauce and just cook all day. And here's all the other ingredients we have that aren't fresh. I always use some tomato paste, some tomato sauce, and some whole peeled tomatoes. That plus some red wine, some salt and pepper. That's all you're really going to need for this whole thing. But the key is how you put it together. Not too much of one thing, not too little. By the time I'm done talking about this, I should be able to add some garlic in. Let's go ahead and sprinkle that. You don't want the heat to be too high. You don't want to burn your garlic. Nobody likes a burnt garlic flavor. Officially popping up in here. We got some garlic going. Stir that around so it doesn't burn at all. Once you start to smell garlic, as in like it's probably getting a little bit browned, you're going to go ahead and grab a handful of your herbs. Just chuck those in there. I always like to put my herbs in first. I like the smell it makes, and plus I like to wilt them up a little bit. Those don't need too much time before you start adding your other veggies. Now we're going to start adding all of our veggies, and you can just go ahead and dump those in there. That's all of our celery, our carrot, our onion. We're just going to let that fat from that oil go ahead and get a little bit of a char on these so they're nice and roasted. Like I said, that's going to release some flavor. Now, the rest of the flavor is going to release as those onions and the celery all kind of melt from the heat and the acid of this cooking all day. All right. Now we're just going to let that get nice and brown. All right, so while that's all going, the next thing we're going to do is add our tomato paste. Now, the tomato paste goes in right now because we want to give this double concentrated, extra strong, acidic tomato paste a little bit of time to get some of that acidity out. You don't want a metallic tasting spaghetti sauce, right? That's how it tastes like it's from a jar and not from your heart. So, I'm going to go ahead and stir around that tomato paste and those nice sweated vegetables. Should build up a little bit of brown on the bottom now. What happens when we get that brown on the bottom is we're going to rinse it off the way anybody rinses something off well, and that's with alcohol. Alcohol is super useful in cooking. I think you'll see that as a theme in my cooking as we go on, whether it be making things with beer cheese or tequila lime chicken. We're living life to the fullest here. And sometimes that's got a little bit of alcohol in it. Now again, you make this as chunky or as smooth as you want it. So as soon as this tomato paste has turned from a bright red to a dark red, and we are starting to leave streaks and little brown pieces around the pan in our Le Creuset, we're going to go ahead and add some basic red cooking wine. Not too much, just enough to coat the bottom and let that sauce drink. As soon as that wine looks like it's incorporated into your mixture here, we're going to go ahead and add our canned products. And then from our canned products, we're going to add our fresh. Really doesn't matter which order you go in. I just always do this one first because that's the sauce. And then these are whole peeled Pomodoro tomatoes. Now, the thing about these Pomodoros is they're going to come whole. And you don't want that in your sauce either. That's a little too thick. That's thick with 4 C's. So what you're going to want to do is chop them up, break them up with your cooking utensil. And as it cooks all day, you come by, you taste it, you add salt to taste, you do this to taste, you do everything. You just give it a little chop. Find a big chunk of tomato and mash it up against the side. Then you'll have a nice smooth sauce for making spaghetti, manicotti, lasagna. It's really hard to resist doing like a really bad Italian accent right now, but I've been working on that, you know, making my Italian accent better. I started somewhere at a Mario, and I feel like I'm morphing into a Mario Batali. That was a cooking joke. All right, now we got our fresh tomatoes, and you're going to see that this sauce is pretty full. Don't worry about that. If you have too much sauce, this stretches, usually for me, into 2 meals. All right, so we got our tomatoes going. We got what looks like a sauce. Now we need your basics. What's going to seem like way too much pepper is just barely going to season this. I like to basically make a nice crust on the top, like a big pile of pepper. There should be enough pepper that I notice the pepper on the top. And then as this cooks all day, obviously you can add more pepper, but you can never add less, so stop. Next thing is classic salt. Same amount of salt as we did pepper. And even that looked like a lot of salt. Trust me, you're gonna add more salt. The last thing you're going to add is that cheese. And we're just going to add that a little bit at a time because we don't want a big melty mess. So you add some in, integrate it into your sauce. I like a lot of Parmesan flavor in my sauce. Trust me, like I said, with the salt and the pepper, there's so many vegetables and tomatoes going on in this sauce that it needs that extra bit of seasoning and that extra bit of flavor to really make it last throughout the day as it cooks. And all the flavors are going to integrate as it cooks. Add a little bit more until we're all gone. Like I said, don't let any of that cheese turn into some weird sticky stringy mess where it looks like you're making a nacho cheese tomato sauce. We're not doing that. Not in this video. All right. Last little bit. Don't worry, I saved some for on the top of spaghetti. If you want to add meat to this, instead of the amount of olive oil I used, use enough olive oil to braise some short ribs or whatever kind of meat you really want to be putting into this thing. And then use the fat that cooks off of the meat after you get a nice Maillard effect on your meat. And that little bit of oil you put in for the meat as what you cook your vegetables in. Like I said, there's lots of ways to customize this sauce. This is just how I like it. We're going to go ahead and turn off our main burner. We're going to get that nice simmer burner going in the back. And then this will be perfectly safe to throw this lid on, slide it on back here, and let the Crusette do the work for you.